There are 4 official candidates running for Oregon Secretary of State, the race to fill Bev Clarno's spot.
Tonight we'll be interviewing both the Democratic and Republican candidates live during this newscast. Joining us now is Democratic and Working Families candidate Shemia Fagan. Thanks very much for being with us.
You got it, Brian and Alicia.
So quickly, how do you think your qualifications suit you so well for the Secretary of State job?
Since I first joined the legislature in 2013, I've been working on the issues that directly relate to this office. In fact, the first bill that I was ever the chief co-sponsor of as a freshman legislature actually created the Office of Small Business Assistance in the Secretary of State's office. And the first time I stepped foot in that office was to work with the then Secretary of State and voting rights advocates to map out a path to passing automatic voter registration, making Oregon the first in the nation. And since then, I've gone on to champion automatic voter registration, working with Republicans to enter Oregon to the National Popular Vote Compact, and most recently putting prepaid postage on our ballots. And so I've been working to expand our democracy and to make sure that government works for everybody during my entire service in the legislature. So I'm happy to take that fight to the Secretary of State's office.
Can you explain a little bit more? You've given out some of the specific instances, but how does that office directly relate to what voters in Southern Oregon will specifically see on Election Day, this one and in the future?
Well, that's a great question, Brian. When I first announced my campaign for Secretary of State, I quickly learned that most people have no idea what this job is. In fact, one of my older brothers who's out in Umatilla County thought I was going to get other people's coffee statewide. So what I see this office as is making sure that government works for everybody, from running elections that are fair and secure, auditing state revenues and programs to make sure they're making a real difference in the lives of people who need them most. Particularly, you think about things like emergency response, wildfire response. That's a system that needs to be audited for so many Southern Oregon families that didn't even get a warning. They maybe heard their neighbors talking outside or saw blazes outside. That's how they knew to get out of their houses. You can do public records that make sure that our government is accountable, that the public's business is done in public. Running that Office of Small Business Assistance that I mentioned earlier, and this year very likely conducting legislative redistricting, and I have committed to do that using a nonpartisan People's Commission.
Now, there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about making sure elections are secure. We just had a story on how the county specifically tries to make sure the system is not hooked up to the internet. What improvements do you think the state of Oregon could make in ensuring that that system is even more safe, and would that require some federal input and federal money to make it happen?
Well, first, Brian, let's back up and make sure that Oregonians don't get misinformation. They should understand that our vote-by-mail system here is incredibly secure. In fact, that these claims of widespread voter fraud are simply a myth, and they're a myth that people try to use to make it harder for certain people to vote. The reality is we've had a secure vote system here. I've actually never voted any other way than vote-by-mail here in Oregon. As Alicia mentioned at the top of the hour, we have none of our counting machines are connected to the internet. We have a unique barcode tracking for every single ballot to make sure that one ballot is cast for only one person. We have forensic signature verification to make sure the person who signs that envelope is that registered voter. And of course, we have a paper trail for every single ballot, so those can be easily audited. But we can always do better. The first thing that I would do would be to shore up our online voter registration system, which we have no indication there's been any problems there. We actually meet the federal minimum for that, but I think that we need to actually increase that. That's where we know which Oregonians to send ballots to because they're registered through that online voter registration system. But again, our counting and our actual scanning of ballots not connected to the internet anywhere here in Oregon in all 36 counties.
Shemia Fagan, Democratic candidate for Secretary of State. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
You got it.
And coming up at 6:30, we'll be speaking live with one of the other challengers, Kim Thatcher. Also in the race, Natalie Provinsky. She is with the Pacific Green and Progressive Party. Professionally, she is a naturopathic doctor. Also on the ticket is Kyle Markey. He is running Libertarian. His occupation is an engineer. The full candidate bios for all candidates can be found on the Oregon Secretary of State website or in your voter pamphlet, which was mailed to all registered voters.